Welcome, everyone. Good to practice together and see each other and continue this wonderful exploration of the Kagyu lineage. Our particular lineage is the Drikung Kagyu, but all of the Kagyus stem from Gampopa. And last week we were talking about Gampopa's meeting with Milarepa, and that all of the lineage up to this point had many different kinds of examples about how to practice, how to dedicate your life to practice. And Milarepa was a yogi who lived in the mountains, teaching people as he happened upon them, or they happened upon him. But Gampopa created the first monastic seat in the Kagyu. So he had a very large monastery and continued teaching. So as you remember, Marpa had lots of students, Milarepa had lots of students, but Gampopa was the primary student. Nonetheless, there was a huge number of teachers actively teaching. And at that period, when Phagmodrupa was born, he studied with many, many teachers. So Phagmodrupa is the next lineage master. And his story is fairly traditional in that there evolved in Tibet a way of telling the stories of the lives of the great masters that always showed that they were born brilliant, they were born practicing, and you don't expect them to be like a documentary of someone's life. There's this sense of how great they were from birth. So Phagmodrupa's story starts out that way, that it said that when he was 2, he started practicing shamatha without being taught, and that he was brilliant in everything he studied and all of the arts. So his parents passed away when he was very little, and he lived with a kind uncle, but at 9, he entered the monastery to study. So when monasteries formed, they became centers of learning. There weren't schools. You lived in a village, and there might have been, as in Milarepa's case, one literate person who was teaching. But now there were these big centers of learning and schools. And Phagmodrupa entered a monastery, and children are allowed to enter a monastery, and they're given a temporary ordination. So they're not necessarily expected to become monks or nuns their whole lives, but they're members of the monastery. And then when he was 25, which is appropriate to make a mature decision, he took full ordination. So you go from temporary ordination to novice ordination to full ordination. So a large part of his biography, the first 42 years, are all the different teachers he studied with, all the different texts he mastered, all the different Vajrayana practices that he mastered. And in that list of teachers and teachings, he studies with the Dakinis. He met with great female teachers and studied with them. And he came with all of this experience. So at 42, he travels to Gampopa's monastery. He hears about Gampopa and wishes to go there. And when you go to a monastery, the first thing you do is greet the teacher. You go in and you go into the temple and prostrate to the temple, you greet the teacher, then they give you a room and you enter to study there. But he didn't meet Gampopa for 4 days, and when he met Gampopa, there was this wonderful exchange. Gampopa at this time is fairly old, and he's not in great health, and that's why they couldn't meet immediately. But he's up in a retreat cave, and he meets with Phagmodrupa, and he says, well, tell me what you study. So Phagmodrupa tells him all of the texts that he mastered. Then what experiences have you had? So Phagmodrupa started to explain his experiences, and he says, according to my teacher, now I've reached the path of seeing. So in the full organization of coming into spiritual maturity, now in this philosophical tradition, they're considered 5 paths or 5 evolutions of spiritual maturity. The path of accumulation, where most of us are, we're taking the bodhisattva vow, we're studying, we're developing relative bodhicitta. Then the path of joining, so there's an increase of wisdom, all of our studies are deepening. The path of seeing is the 3rd evolution. And that's when you have a direct experience of emptiness, you have a direct experience of absolute bodhicitta. So one generally doesn't speak of these experiences unless you're with your teacher, but essentially he's saying, I'm a bodhisattva now, that's where I am. And the 4th path is the path of meditation, and the 5th path is the path of no more learning. So he's not indicating to Gampopa that he's enlightened, but he's saying, I'm pretty well along. So Gampopa says, really? Are you really holding to that answer? That you've experienced emptiness, absolute bodhicitta? And Phagmodrupa says, yes, according to my teachers and all the texts that I've read, the definition is uninterrupted continuity of experience, bliss and emptiness, uncontrived nature of mind, the peak state of the innate mind. That's where I am. And Gampopa says to him, oh, how unfortunate. Are you holding to this answer from the bottom of your heart, that this is the path of seeing? And Phagmodrupa says, yes, according to the quintessential instructions and meditative experiences, this is where I am. So Gampopa is holding in his hand a ball of sampa. That's what the major food was, roasted barley mixed with butter. And he's squeezing this, it's like dough, and saying, I prefer this lump of dough to your path of seeing. Go take a walk, go up that hill, and later we'll discuss your attachment to what you've received from others. So Phagmodrupa walks up the hill, and he starts pondering essentially Gampopa's dismissal of his experiences. And in a short time, all of his meditation experiences disintegrated, and he realized authentic realization, which is beyond rational mind. And the way we can understand this is, for a very long time, we're reading and studying and meditating, and we're rationally constructing what meditation experience should be. And this is called superimposition. We may have some hints of direct experience, but then we start comparing that to what we've read and defining it by what we've read, and it becomes conceptual again. So in that walk up the hill, he opened to a deeper, more authentic experience, and his mind became completely unobstructed. And when there is this kind of meeting with one's root guru, and the particular karma has been accumulated, this can happen with just a meeting, not from sitting in teachings, not from empowerments, just the face-to-face meeting and a few words from your root guru. So his mind totally opened up. Gampopa said, was aware of that he had this experience because Gampopa, being fully enlightened, knew the experience of all of his students. And Phagmodrupa came back to him, and Gampopa said, well, I have nothing more to teach you. This is essentially what you needed to learn from me, but I have some convenient practice methods which I will give you. And so he gave him all of his practice instructions, and it said it was like pouring water into a full vase. So then Phagmodrupa's experience and study was complete. So Gampopa was spending a lot of time in retreat because he was getting closer and closer to death. So he went back into retreat, and Phagmodrupa went down and found his two friends, Dusum Khenpa and Salton Shogun. And these three are called the three men from Kham. Kham is an area of Tibet. And they were all in a monastery. They were monks, but it was the 10th lunar day of the month. And in the Vajrayana tradition, the 10th day and the 25th day are special celebration days in which these great feast offerings are held, if you're practicing Vajrayana. And so they decided they would have a feast, and of course, Phagmodrupa is in a very blissful state because his mind is just fully opened. And in these feast offerings, sometimes there's a little taste of alcohol. So Vajrayana is the practice of letting go of non-dual conception. So if there is perfect realization, then we call it one taste. All the tastes are the same. So there's nothing good or bad about alcohol or something that we would really reject like urine or something like water. So they decided, we're going to have a really big feast today, and we're going to ask permission to have some alcohol at the feast. But they were 25. They were mischievous. And each one separately went to the abbot and said, we want to have a sog, we want to have a feast. Can I have a little alcohol? So the little alcohol of each one became a lot of alcohol. And so they were singing and dancing, and also in monasteries, there's no music and no dancing other than the spiritual chanting. Anyway, big party, blissful state. And it goes on all night. So the disciplinarian of the monastery gets furious, and he goes to them and said, okay, this is too much. You've broken all the rules of the monastery. Look at how much alcohol you're drinking. Look at your wild party. Out, 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 out. You've got to leave. And they tried to say, oh, but we are doing this in a meditative way. And he said, I don't care what you say. Gone. You're out of here. And he even beat them. So Gampopa is still in retreat. And they say, oh, please, at least let us stay till the morning. And in the morning, they started to walk down the mountain. And Gampopa, even though he's in retreat, he can feel something is really missing. Something's wrong in the monastery. And so he sends his attendant out, and he says, well, the three men from Kham are leaving. So Gampopa comes out of his cave and sings this famous song. So all the stories in all the Kagyu lineages that are collected into the texts called the Reign of Wisdom, they all end with this story because it's so beautiful. And Gampopa sings to them. He sees that all the birds are flying away. He sees that the trees are even bending over, that this is a heartbreaking situation, that this karmic meeting is prematurely ending. The song he sings goes through many verses, but it says, in the future, when the dark age has come, whoever spreads the meaning of the profound Dharma, the Samadhi Raja, will be the son of all the Buddhas of the 3 times. He will be the best of physicians, curing all the sickness of the kleshas. The victorious ones will praise him beyond description. I promised to spread that teaching, and all who assembled here also made aspirations and vowed to help me. Because of our excellent previous aspiration, we've met at this time. Through sharing karma and merit, we are fortunate. We were taught well the profound Dharma. Now we are in the stage of non-returning. So essentially saying the breakthrough you had went thoroughly into the path of seeing, into the path of meditation, and the path of no more learning. So these last stages of the path can actually happen in moments. So here we are at the ultimate state together. We have this extraordinary karma and merit together. Sons, do not go any further, come back up. And this refrain is repeated over and over. Sons, do not go any further, come back up, come back up. So the 3 men from Kham sing back to him. The Guru has said, come back. So we are going back up, and we are climbing the steps of the higher realms, going up and up. We are stomping down the lower realms, going up and up. Show Mo, what a joyful, good experience. And they repeat that verse many times. Climbing the steps of the higher realms, stomping down the steps of the lower realms. There's a complete celebration of this karmic moment. And it said that it's such an extraordinary moment that all of them, the 4 of them, are in this enlightened state, that they left footprints, numerous footprints in the rocks. So in the state of emptiness, the laws of physics don't operate anymore. And so their feet sank into the rocks, and you can see the footprints. So Phagmodrupa was content to practice Gampopa's instructions for another 5 years. And Gampopa was dying, and at his death said to the entire assembly that this Geshe from Kham, or Phagmodrupa, and myself are so indistinguishable from each other that you could split a hair 100 times and still find no difference. Therefore, all of you great meditators, if you need to request practice advice, request advice from him. And all of you who need to cut through superimposition, look to him. And then Gampopa died. So the 3 men from Kham, Dusung Khenpa became the first Karmapa. The second man, Sultan, didn't teach in this ordinary realm. So it said that he had students in the lineage, but it wasn't in the earthly realm. And Phagmodrupa became the source of many rivers. So from Phagmodrupa came many extraordinary students who had complete realization, who began their own lineages, including the Drikung lineage. So from the Drikung side of the story, this is, the greatness of Phagmodrupa and what makes Phagmodrupa of the students of Gampopa the foremost student. And as I said last week, each lineage tells it from their own perspective. So after Gampopa died, Phagmodrupa stayed and constructed a stupa for him, and went on to found his own monastery where he taught all of these extraordinary students. And he went on teaching and teaching and teaching for a long time. And he kept saying, but all my students have not assembled yet. So it was quite some time into his teaching career before Lord Jigten Sumgun, who founded the Kagyu lineage, appeared. And when Lord Jigten Sumgun arrived, he said, now everybody is assembled. And he died at 61. His last words were, all dharmas are non-dual and fully pure. So he gave vast teachings. We have records of all of his written works. He composed a lamrim like Gampopa did. And of all of his students, because we're the Kagyu lineage, we would say that Lord Jigten Sumgun was the foremost student, but that's the kind of prejudice that is natural just in terms of praising one's teacher. It's not taken particularly seriously into sectarianism. So it's interesting to think of the stories and the meetings, the karmic meetings of these major teachers. And the story of the conversation with Gampopa, are you really holding on to that view? We could see that in the interaction, the way it was described, there was a quality of not necessarily pride of achievement, but slight attachment to achievement, not a sense of openness to go further. And it was that openness that Gampopa cut through, so that the quality of his meditation experience went beyond our dualistic mind, our rational mind, our conceptual mind. And then the story of the three men from Kham is another really interesting story in the sense of understanding the balance of the spiritual path, which is the monastic vows and the lay vows provide guardrails for a long time, and they provide essentially a path of letting go to any kind of attachment, and discipline that is meant to open your mind, not close your mind in rigidity. At the same time, if you look at the history of the monastic lineages and the practice lineages in Tibet, you can see that there were times when people who didn't have pure wisdom went too far, and then there would be a reform era, then there would be the Vajrayana going too far, people intellectually thinking they understand non-duality and getting carried away, and then great reforms taking place. So there's a sense of really understanding that it is only rare teachers that have the wisdom to distinguish what is fully enlightened action and what is fooling yourself in terms of Vajrayana, and at the same time if you have a monastery with 50,000 people, keeping good discipline and keeping the monastic rule allows everyone to harmoniously develop and progress. So let's say it's the best benefit for all of the vast numbers of people, and human beings can always fool themselves and think that they are the exceptions. And we see that operating today when the Vajrayana concept of one taste becomes misused as a excuse to do to act in ways that are not appropriate. So I always love Kenshin Rinpoche. Kenshin Rinpoche would say, I'm speaking of Kenshin Konsho Gelsen, oh, okay, you think you can drink alcohol now. Well, if you're so enlightened and you can drink alcohol without being attached to alcohol, then drink urine first. There's a sense of, just down to earth, before you act in ways that you say are miraculous, prove it using the least attractive way of proving it. So there's a steadying influence by all of these masters historically. And what we also see is with humility, the sense of Gampopa emphasizing retreat, Gampopa giving practice method, the expectation of years of study, years of practice, carrying you, supporting you up to a certain state, and continuous breakthroughs along the way, but not the ultimate breakthrough until there's no attachment to even the subtlest meditation state or the subtlest philosophical tenet. I find these two particular stories of Phagmodrupa's life to be very instructive, and I'm curious to see what you think and what you see and what you learn from them. So next week, Phagmodrupa's teaching and Lord Jigten Sumgun arrives, and we start with the story of Lord Jigten Sumgun, which is, of course, my favorite story. So let's take a minute to just think quietly about these karmic meetings between extraordinary teachers. It's really hard to, for us, particularly us in the West, Canada and America, to think historically like this because our countries are so young. But the Drikung Kagyu is over 800 years old. So if you think of all of these practice instructions lasting 800 years, it's these key figures along the way that ensure that the subtlety and intent of the teachings are being passed in a way that's absolutely unconfused and are presented in a clear enough way for hundreds of thousands of people to not only practice but benefit from them. So let's do a short dedication and open up discussion. Bodhicitta, excellent and precious mind, where it is unborn may it arise, where it is born may it not decline, but ever increase higher and higher.